Have you ever had a running shoe that you love to run in, but after a while running in it, every time you go out in it, there's some new ache or pain or some problem with it? Well, recently I reviewed this shoe, the New Balance Rebel V5, and I was very favorable in my review of this shoe, and I still am very favorable in this shoe. I still really like this shoe, even with what I'm going to talk about in this video. But recently this shoe's been giving me some issues, so I thought it'd be interesting to sit down and talk about how I troubleshoot and diagnose what's going on with the shoe with my running form. Before I jump in, a little disclaimer. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a trainer, I'm not a physio. I have no qualifications to actually diagnose anything that I'm doing in this video. However, I am a runner who has run in a ton of shoes for a very long time, and over the past 15 to 20 years, I have had a lot of different issues with various running shoes, and I've learned how to diagnose and troubleshoot them based on my body, my form, my mechanics. So that's what I'm trying to get across here. Not any sort of solution specifically to your problem, but more of how you can go about looking at them, and maybe if you do go talk to a doctor or a physio or a trainer, what to start with and start that conversation with the right information. I'm going to do something a little different here, and I'm actually going to tell you what I think the problem with this shoe and my mechanics actually is, and then I'll spend the rest of the video kind of explaining where I'm coming from with that. But really, the problem I'm running into with this shoe is an Achilles issue. I'm getting some tightness in my Achilles, especially where the Achilles attaches to the heel, right at the base. That's a key sign of some strain or inflammation in the Achilles, which generally is coming from the shoe. And it's only really happening in the shoe, and I'll get more into that in this video. But really, there's three problems with this shoe that are causing that issue. The first is this is a very, very soft foam in this shoe. It's a very soft shoe with, and this is the key point, a very low resiliency. This is a shoe that there's a lot of sink, but there's not a lot of rebound. There is a tiny bit of rebound, more than the previous version, the Rebel V4, where that shoe was very spongy. You step in it, you go straight to the ground. This shoe's still very soft, but you do have a little bit of a bounce. And in my review for this shoe, I said I like that because this isn't an overly energetic foam that allows you to be in control of what you're running in. And I think it's a better daily training option than a much more energetic or aggressive foam. The second point is too much too soon. And this is all on me. And really where that's coming from is I just put too much time in this shoe based on some other issues going on in the shoe that really rush this problem from coming forward. And the third is width. This is a wide shoe, both in the fit, in the heel and the midfoot, but also in the platform. It's a very wide platform back here. And I think that's contributing somewhat to the problem I'm running into. But as I said, I'm still very much positive about this shoe, and I stand by my review of this shoe. I think the problems I've run into with this shoe aren't necessarily something that a lot of other runners are going to completely run into. I think it's just a combination of things that I'm specifically running into with this shoe. So keep that in mind with the rest of this video. So let's start with the first issue, the soft foam in this shoe. Now, New Balance's fuel cell foam, especially the PIBA variant, to me has always been a little on the soft side, a little bit too much soft if you ask me. And as I said, in the Rebel V4, that version of the fuel cell PIBA was just so soft. You step in that shoe, you go straight to the ground, and that was kind of all that shoe did. In this shoe, because of the added stack height and the tweak that New Balance has made to the formula of this foam, again, I talk about that in my review, link in the description, this shoe does have a little tiny bit of resilience. It's not completely go straight to the ground, but you step in this shoe and you can feel it compress, and then there's just a little bit of rebound coming out, which again, for a daily trainer or a daily trainer with an extra gear that you can pick it up into tempo running, I really like that because this is not an overly aggressive shoe. This is a shoe that, because of that softness, is very flexible, and that's ultimately what I like about this shoe, but it allows me to be in control of how I'm running in this shoe, and that's something I really, really value in a daily trainer. However, that softness is where ultimately the problem starts for me with my Achilles. This is a soft shoe. You sink into this shoe. And that really leads me to the next point, the too much too soon. And these 2 points go together really kind of equally. I think most of the problems I'm running into with this shoe are these 2 points. So when I review a shoe on this channel, especially a trainer in my initial impressions, I like to do a 50-mile initial impressions review, especially again with a trainer. Super shoes, track spikes, those kind of things, I'm fine going a little less in those, but for trainers, I want to get it to at least 50 miles. So that means I usually do that 50 miles in about 7 to 10 days. So that means I'm doing back to back to back days in a shoe, sometimes more than that. Sometimes I'll do 4 to 5 days of running back to back days in the same shoe. That's something I will never ever do in a normal sort of running environment. It's only when I'm trying to pack a bunch of miles into a shoe to really begin to test it and get it done in that kind of very finite set of time before I put my review up. So that's where these first two, soft foam and too much too soon, really come together. The soft foam in this shoe means that the drop in the shoe, which is 6 mil, actually feels quite a bit less than 6 mil. I would say it's closer to 2 to 4 mil, depending on how you weight the shoe, probably even less. This may be closer to 0 drop for a lot of runners, especially midfoot and heel strikers. And then packing back to back to back days in that really is something that brings out any kind of weakness in my calf or my Achilles. And I definitely noticed that on my right foot. The second, that running in the shoe back to back to back days, again, something I never do, means that this soft foam is getting compressed day after day after day, and it never really has time to rebound and go back to its default state. This is why I'm a big advocate of at least a 2-shoe running rotation for someone running more than, I would say, 3 to 4 hours a week, because you want to give your shoes at least 24 hours, ideally a little bit more time to rest essentially between runs. You want the foam to completely decompress, return to its default state, and really be sort of fresh feeling for that next run. If you're running in it day after day after day after day, the foam's just getting compressed more and more and more each day. And by the 4th or 5th day, you're running on a foam that's already very compressed, and any kind of weird mechanics, striking, has been molded into this shoe. And in my case, since I'm a 4-foot striker who supinates, I think I'm getting a little bit of compression on the lateral side of this shoe, which when I'm landing is really rolling my foot inward and impacting this medial heel flare, midfoot and heel flare, which is really getting to the third point, the width. So that's causing some sort of muscle strain in my Achilles. And I'm very confident that that is what's going on with the shoe, that I did troubleshoot and diagnose it correctly, because as I was running in this shoe over the past week or so, I have been running in some other shoes. And if you follow me on Strava, link in the description, you've seen this play out on a daily basis. And I put my notes in there as to what's going on. So after my initial review went up, I went out for another run in the shoe, and that's where I really noticed the Achilles tightness. It wasn't pain. It's not really an injury. It's that little niggle. Again, there's sort of a pinching sensation where my Achilles feels like it attaches to the heel bone, essentially, a hot spot, if you will. Again, I've had Achilles issues in the past, not really from running, actually from cycling and skateboarding way back when. And that's something that I know is a sign that if I don't address it now, it's going to blow up into a larger issue. And as soon as I felt that, I'm like, okay, I need to go back, take a day or two off of running, but then try some other shoes to see if I can replicate that problem in another shoe. So as soon as I felt that issue, took the shoe off, I rested the next day. Then the day after that, I went out and I ran in this shoe, the Nike Pegasus 41. Now, this is my baseline for all trainers. If you watch this channel, you know I'm a big fan of the Pegasus. And the Peg 41 is that shoe that I really compare every other shoe to, especially trainers, just because this shoe works for me. Now, this is still a fairly flexible shoe, but it's a much firmer platform. I would say it's a denser platform, a much denser platform than the Rebel V5. Also, importantly, this is a 10 mil drop shoe. And you definitely feel that. When you're running in this shoe, it feels like an 8 to 10 mil drop. And that's something I've always loved about the Pegasus. And that's important because the higher the drop, the more theoretically that's actually isolating your Achilles, not letting it stretch too much. And it should take some pressure off your calf and Achilles if you're running in a higher drop shoe. So that run I went out in this shoe, I actually found that I ran about 5 to 6K, I think. No problems whatsoever. It was totally fine. I had some soreness, but it wasn't pain. It wasn't that kind of hot spot where I was talking about at the base of the heel bone. It just really worked. And I was really happy to actually be able to run in this shoe. Now, as a runner, I'm someone who prides myself on being able to run in a 0 drop shoe to a 10 mil drop shoe, and really dropping a shoe doesn't ever really affect me. But what I'm generally doing there is I'm running, one run in a 0 drop shoe, then the next day I'll go out in like a 6 or 8 mil drop shoe, then maybe the next day I'll go in a 10 mil drop. I'm not doing a lot of runs going from like an 8 to 10 mil drop shoe. Then I'm going to spend like the next 5 runs in a 0 drop shoe. Then I go back to an 8 to 10 mil drop shoe. I'm sort of going around between different drops. But when I was running in this shoe for the testing I want to do on the channel, and then post my review, I wanted to get this shoe at about 150 miles to really test the durability of this foam. That means I was just putting a lot of time, back to back to back days, again, not letting the foam relax and kind of rebound back to its default state, but also running in a much lower drop shoe than I typically have been. Most of this year I've been running in 6 to 8 mil drop, probably closer to 8 mil drop shoes. And as I said, this shoe, while it is on paper a 6 mil drop shoe, because it's so soft, is definitely lower than that. So that's that sort of too much too soon. I was putting too much time in the same shoe, but also I was putting too much time in a much lower drop shoe than I had been running in over the past couple months. And that really is a recipe for disaster, especially with the Achilles and the calf. Now, I did, I think, 2 runs in this shoe. I also ran in the Nike Vomero 18, which is essentially the Peg 41, but just more built up. There's just more foam and just more cushion in that shoe. Neither one of those shoes gave me an issue. So after about 3 or 4 days of running in the Peg and the Vomero, I decided that I'm going to go try this shoe again. So I put this shoe up on and I went out to my normal sort of training route, and within the first 400 meters of running in this shoe, I could feel that hot spot on my Achilles at the base of the heel bone essentially. And within 800 meters, it was turning into pain. So I shut that run down, came home, took these shoes off, and decided to rest for the rest of the day. Elevation, compression, massage gun, just really resting it. But later that afternoon, I actually went out in this, my pair of Luna Venato sandals. This is about as barefoot as you can possibly get. I do have a background in barefoot running. I have run thousands of kilometers in this sandal. This is, again, about as minimal as you can possibly get. That afternoon, I went out and did about 2 to 3 kilometers of walking and running in the shoe. It was kind of unplanned, so it wasn't really something I recorded on Strava. But that walking and running in this shoe, and probably of that 3 kilometers, maybe about almost 2 kilometers of it was kind of jogging, picking it up into my slower into my easy pace. Absolutely no issues with this. I didn't have any sort of tightness in my Achilles. No problems running in this, the same day that this shoe was giving me that pain. But after running in the Luna sandal, that's where I really began to wrap my head around what is actually going on in this shoe. So that softer foam that's taking the 6 mil drop and making it much lower than that, and then spending too much time in this in a much softer foam that isn't giving me a lot of rebound. I think that resilience of a softer foam is really important, because I've run a lot in the Adidas Adios Pro 4, which is a very, very soft shoe. I've run a lot over the years in Nike Zoom X foam, both variants of it. I've never had any issues with either one of those shoes or foams and my Achilles, because there's a much higher resilience to that foam. Another shoe recently, the Atreyu Daily Trainer 2, that is a very soft foam, but it's also a very resilient foam. And it's actually a very wide shoe as far as the contact patch on the ground. But that shoe didn't give me any issues either because of the resiliency in the foam. And I think that resiliency is important because it doesn't let your foot sink in and kind of stay there and move around, because a higher resilient foam is you're impacting and then you're springing off. You're going forward. It's rebounding out. Your foot isn't kind of staying in the midsole of the shoe, which it is in this shoe. And that's where width comes into play here, the final third point of this. The width of the upper, meaning the fit of the upper, this I describe as a very generous fit shoe. It's not wide, but it's a very generous fit. There's a lot of room in this upper, especially in the midfoot and the heel. It's not the tightest around the foot. Now, as I've said, I come from barefoot running, but I do not like natural shaped shoes, something like an Ultra, for example, because typically what they'll have is they'll have a lot of room here in the forefoot for your toes to splay and wiggle around, but also they have very sloppy midfoots and usually fairly wide heels. Now, this is not a natural fit shoe, but it is much wider than anything I've really been running in over, I don't know, at least the past couple of years. So while I do like how generous this fit is and it's a very comfortable fit, I do think there's a little bit more width here in the midfoot and especially the heel cup, that in that soft foam that's compressing and then molding to my foot and probably pitching my foot inward a little bit is then allowing my foot, because it is a wider fit here in the midfoot and the heel, to kind of also shift probably inward or it's shifting somewhere. And again, those things together are what's really straining my Achilles. Because when I put on this shoe, the Nike Pegasus 41 or the Vomero 18, this is a very, very tight fit to the heel. It's a very good lockdown in the midfoot, and there is a room in the forefoot of the shoe, but it's not a generous fit. This is a very constricting, nice training fit. I love the fit of this shoe, and I don't get any sort of wiggle room for my foot at all in this. So the higher drop, the denser foam, and the better fit in this shoe are really containing my foot and not letting my foot move around the way it is. Now, I was also thinking, well, okay, what if my foot does move around? Again, in the Luna, even though I did only about 2K of running and another K of walking and sort of jogging in the shoe, there's nothing holding my foot into this. But again, my foot's moving around in here and it's not causing any issues. Absolutely none. So I think if my foot can move around like it does on this, it's fine. But if my foot can move around and then run into something like it does in this shoe, where it's not really freely being able to move around, that's again what was causing the issue for me. Based on all that, it's not the end of the road for this shoe, the Rebel V5. I still really enjoy running this shoe, and I think it's actually still a great shoe. I stand by my review of this shoe. But what it means for me in this shoe is I'm not going to be able to put as much volume in this shoe as quickly as I was originally planning to get it to 150 miles to really see the durability of this shoe. This is a shoe that I'll try to pull out once a week or maybe once every 10 days or so and just see how my foot and my leg is responding to. And eventually I will get this probably closer to 100 unless I run into a continued issue. And then I know that, as much as I love this shoe, I just can't run in this shoe. But I'm pretty confident now that I know what's going on with my foot in this shoe. And I hope this video and sort of my thought process of troubleshooting this helped you begin to approach any problems you had in your shoe specifically. Again, my case here is specific to me. There's probably nothing in this video that's specific to you, though I think some of the things I talked about, like drops, super soft foams, too much play in the way the shoe fits, those are things to look at as you troubleshoot your own running shoe problems. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you want to support what I do here, go to sagasurunning.com for merch or click the join button below. If neither one of those options are good for you, leave a comment, leave a like, because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.